Hi guys, and welcome to a new video. Today's video is a step-by-step guide to help anyone who wants to turn their ideas or concepts into a cake. Maybe you've got a really cool idea in your head, but you're overwhelmed, you think it's going to be too difficult, or you just don't know where to begin. This video is to help guide you through the process of creating a delicious masterpiece. I will be using my upcoming dragon cake project as an example to help you follow along. Step 1. Brain dump. I usually come up with cake ideas after seeing a picture, watching a show, or hearing about a flavor combination that I just need to try. So for this video, I'm going to use the example of my next project. I've made a little drawing here so you can see what it roughly looks like in my head. I first got the idea when I was watching Extreme Cake Makers on Netflix, and I saw this cake in the intro, and I thought it would be really cool to make a cake, remove a slice of it, and then have something come out of it. I'm not quite sure how I came up with the idea of a dragon and coins, but this was the main inspiration behind it. I tend to leave myself a couple of days to think about my ideas since they usually evolve and improve over time. But once that's done, I will just take a piece of paper and put all the components and ideas down. So for this cake, the main component is the slice that's missing. So you have this cake here. It's a very rough sketch, but it's just to show you how I just put all the ideas together, just so I can see exactly what the cake consists of. So you've got these stacks of cakes. You cut a slice out. I'll need to think of the icing or the coating. I'll need to think of what cake goes inside, what comes out of it. In this case, it's a dragon. It's a very, very simplified dragon. What the dragon is made out of. Icing, that's the icing, sorry. And then I'll also need to think about the size, the width, so that's part of the size as well. So we'll do these two. The coins themselves, like how they're gonna be made, what are they gonna be made out of? Coins, and then I think those are the main ideas. But what I'll do is do a rough sketch and then think about anything that has to do with this cake. I'll just write it down. So for example, I know the dragon is going to be made out of sugar paste, so I'll just write that down. The cake, not too bothered, it's probably going to be a sponge. I know I want the icing to be black. And then the most important part, I also want kind of like a cage to go around it, like a lattice cage, probably made out of chocolate. Cage. I know it's not a cage, but I'll call it a cage for this video. Chocolate. And then I'll just go through every section that I can think of. I'll just put everything down. At this stage, I don't usually have all of it figured out, but I try and focus on the key concept. For me, this cake is more about the final look and the appearance than the taste, so I'm not too bothered about which flavor. That's why it's probably going to be a sponge. But I just want to focus on the decoration and how it's going to look overall. Obviously, if your cake idea or concept is focused on texture, taste, anything else, you'll need to put that first before figuring anything else out. I like to gather references if necessary. I like looking at pictures online to get a more concrete vision of the final product, and I also like to plan the color palette. So I already know the icing's gonna be black, dragon's gonna be red, white, the cage is gonna be golden. So just like this drawing here, but this one's mostly in black and white. But you can see the cage is gonna be golden, icing's gonna be black, the coins are gonna be probably copper gold, and then the dragon is gonna be red, maybe green. I'll have a think about it. I'll probably do some more sketches just to make sure I have the color palette. I like to make the color palette first, or in the first stages, because that way it's less of a guessing game halfway through planning it. But once you've written down and drawn everything you could think of, then you can move on to step 2. So step 2 is going to be breaking it down. So you have all your ideas, your rough ideas, your components, the rough sketch, everything's on a little piece of paper, and now you need to sort them all out and break them down into smaller chunks so that you can make the whole process easier. I like to use small categories to keep things clear and concise. So the first category for me is going to be cake type. Cake type, here we go. What I'll do is I'll list all the categories I can think of and then fill them out. That's just easier for me, but obviously do what works for you. The next category is going to be the icing or frosting. And then I'm going to have the decorating, which I guess is kind of a vague category. That sounds like kind of a broad category, but because I've already drawn this, I really know what components are going to be involved in the decorating, so it's actually not that overwhelming. And then the last one is going to be, actually there's 2 more. Sorry about that. The size, and then the utensils and ingredients. For the cake type, again, for my project, it's not a big deal, so that's why I'm probably going to do a sponge. And I've already made it before, so I already know the recipe for it. As long as it's the right consistency to support the height, then a sponge is fine. If your main idea revolves around taste or consistency, then obviously spend more time on this category, but for me, it's going to be very simple. It's going to be a sponge. And because of the size of it, I want it to be 8-inch cakes, and I also want it to be slightly taller than it's wide. So that's probably gonna be 4 to 5 sponges. I guess it depends on how high they are. I'll check the recipe I have just to know exactly how big they are, but that's gonna be at least 4 cakes stacked together just so I can get the height I want. So then I can think of how much sponge I need to make. The icing or frosting, now for the icing or frosting, I already know I want it to be black, but I've also promised myself to never use fondant again to cover a cake, so I'm gonna go for a black mirror glaze because I think it'll look really nice and somehow I feel like it's gonna be a lot easier than using fondant, to be honest. I've never made it before, but it can't get worse than fondant, so I'm gonna go for a mirror glaze. It's gonna happen. And then also buttercream between the layers. So buttercream I've done before, that's easy, that's fine. Black. Decorating, so there's like 3 main sections to the decorating. There's the dragon. So I'll do a little star here, dragon. And then the dragon's gonna be made of sugar paste. I already know that, but I'm thinking I might need a metal wire just to make the structure, like the body of it for the frame, and then maybe a thin rod. That's not the right word, but like a thin layer of Rice Krispies, just so that it's more sturdy and then it's not entirely made out of sugar paste, so that it just holds better. All right. So that's for the dragon, and then it's going to be painted with food coloring. I'm not really going to mess with different colored sugar paste or fondant. That seems like way too much. But if you're up for it, obviously, don't limit yourself. If you think you can do more, then obviously go for it. But I already feel like this project's going to be crazy enough, so I'm going to try and make it as easy for me as possible. The cage itself, we already know it's going to be chocolate. I'll just need a gold spray that's edible, so that I can spray it gold and it's a nice color. And then the coins, so for the coins, I should give myself more space. This already looks messy. For the coins, I'm going to make a mold. I'm gonna buy some coins online, like some fake ones. You can find them online, and then make a mold of it so that I can just put the fondant in or the sugar paste in and save a huge amount of time, because there's gonna be quite a few of them. So I'll need to keep that in mind. I'll need to make the mold ahead of time, but again, that'll be in one of the next steps. For now, I just need to know the 3 ideas and roughly how they're gonna be made. So that's out of the way. And then the last section is the utensils and ingredients. I'm quite lucky. I have most of the basics for cake making or baking, but I am gonna need some specialty items for this one. So I'm gonna need some rods to support the cakes. I'm gonna need metal wire for the dragon. I'm gonna need, again, gold spray paint for the cage. And then a mold kit to make the coins. And also, last but not least, I'm gonna need a sheet of plastic. I don't even know what they're called, I'll look it up. But because I need to make the cage, I'm gonna pipe it onto a sheet of plastic and then fold it or make it into a circle and then let it set in the fridge like that so that it can fit around the cake. But I need a sheet of plastic to do that, and I don't have one yet, so I'm gonna add that to the list. So yeah, just this is the easy section. You just break it down in the categories that are important to you. So for me, cake, icing or frosting, the decorated components, if you have any of those on your cake. The size, it is important just to keep in mind so that you know exactly what scale you're working on. And then the utensils and ingredients. Now, because the main part of this cake is just going to be the sponge, I already have everything I need, so I don't need to worry about that. But I am going to need ingredients for the mirror glaze, the Rice Krispies, and also the sugar paste for the dragon and the coins. So now for the third step. Third step is going to be troubleshooting. So you've already done a rough sketch of the cake. You already know what categories you need to focus on. You've already broken it down a little bit. What I like to do before even beginning baking is to think about all the things that can go wrong, especially for a project this size and this complex. So I like to think about all the things that can go wrong before they get the chance to go wrong. That way I can say, I knew this was gonna happen. Why do I even bother baking? And that way I'm not surprised and I can have a plan B lined up. It just makes things a lot easier and a lot more smooth. I'm not too worried about the sponge in this cake. I've already made sponge before, that's gonna be the easy part, but obviously I need to think about the mirror glaze, about making the dragon right. I need it to be the right dimension so it fits nicely within the removed slice. And then the coin themselves, they should be quite easy since I'm using a mold. And I can do a test run before I even start baking the cake. I can do that the day before. The cage itself will need to fit the actual size of the cake. And even if I know what size of cake I'm gonna bake, like an 8-inch, it's just never really 8 inches, is it? You know, like once you've baked it, once you've removed some of the edges, once you've made it nice and straight, it might be a bit thinner than that. It might be a little bit less than 8-inch. So I don't want a huge gap between the cake and the cage. So what I'll do is I'm gonna have to think about baking the cake first and assembling it before I measure how wide the cage needs to be when it's flat, because obviously I need the slice to be removed. I don't want to just guess what size the slice is going to be and hope that it aligns with the cage. So that's something you need to keep in mind, is maybe you're best leaving some of the things for later. So assembling the cake first, measuring, and then getting it right. And I might be tempted to even make 2 of them at once so that if one of them breaks or if something goes wrong, then I have to wait another 30 minutes for the next one to be ready. And then obviously you need to keep in mind things like fridge space. This is going to be quite big. I need this to fit on a shelf in the fridge, especially if I make 2 of them. I don't want to start making this and then realize I have no space in the fridge and then have to empty it quick enough before this sets. So this is the type of thing you need to keep in mind before you even start something like that. Obviously, the more you bake and the more projects you make, or the more cake projects you go through, the sooner you realize just what needs to be done. But obviously, if this is your first project or you're a bit overwhelmed and you don't know, you're afraid you might forget something, this is something to keep in mind, like fridge space. And speaking of things that need to be done once the cake is assembled, I want the dragon to be the right size, right? I want the little arms to be resting on the edges of that slice or on the edges of the cake. I also don't want to make his arms ridiculously long. I want it to be a bit consistent. I'm gonna have to make the dragon once the cake is assembled. Ideally, I can make the dragon the day before, and that way I can just put everything together. That would be ideal, but I don't think that's realistic. I also need to make sure the cake isn't glazed before I test this out, because if I make the dragon and then rest it on top of the glazed cake, then it might just mess up the glaze, and I don't want that. I know myself, I'm not going to want to try the glaze all over again, or let alone the cake or the dragon. Hopefully this is just everything in one go, but if you think of these things ahead of time, then obviously it's a lot less frustrating if you're prepared. So I'll make sure that the dragon is made once the cake is assembled, but before it's glazed. And I'll also think about whether or not I want the inside of this slice to be glazed, or if I want to show the inside of the cake. I'm not sure yet, I'll have to think about that, but obviously once I decide, I'll need to plan ahead, because it might be messy to cut the slice once the glaze is on. I'll have to think about that. So in terms of troubleshooting for my project specifically, this is all I can think of. This is all the issues I can actually think of right now, but obviously if I think of anything else, I'll always write it down. I like to watch a lot of tutorials before I even get started, just so I don't have to make the mistakes other people have had to make. I might still make them, but I want to be as prepared as possible. And now for the 4th step. So the 4th step is a very important one. 4th step is time and money. Obviously, this could very well be the first step before you even start anything, or even think about thinking about a cake. But for this step, you really want to make sure everything is lined up. So all the components have been explored, organized. It's time to think about a schedule and how much it's going to cost. I'm quite lucky that I usually have time to work on my projects, especially during this lockdown, but my biggest issue obviously is money. A lot of these baking projects can be quite expensive, and I usually have other arts and crafts activities happening in the background. So I really need to time everything so that I don't spend my rent money on cake, especially since this is a cake I'm only making for myself and for my channel. This isn't a commission. So I really need to think about what I'm spending my money on and make it a realistically priced cake or project. The basic cakes that I make are expensive enough, but for this one I have a few new things to purchase, such as a mold kit, lots of sugar paste, I need ingredients for a mirror glaze, edible gold spray paint. The individual items might not be pricey, but it adds up very quickly. So my advice is that if you're just doing this for fun, plan as far ahead as possible, unless you've got endless time and money, in which case you probably don't even need this video, just make someone else make the cake. But if you don't have unlimited time and money, then make sure you're not hit with a huge bill and sleepless nights trying to finish a project, even though that's probably going to happen anyway. But do your best to plan ahead, just because I know how expensive some of these projects can be. So if you're doing this as a commission, or if you have a very specific deadline, then break things down as much as possible so it's not hectic. Baking can be stressful enough, so try and make your life as easy as possible by creating a schedule that you can realistically stick to. Ultimately, just do whatever works for you and keep adapting as you create more masterpieces. And now for the last step. Step 5 is get started. And more importantly, take it one step at a time. You've done all the homework, you've gotten all the ingredients, so now it's just time to get going. If you follow my previous step and broken the cake making down into small sections, then just take them one step at a time and don't stop until it's finished. In my previous project, I had to create a smiling mouth out of fondant, and I was so overwhelmed by the idea of making teeth that I just sat there and stared at my desk for a while. But once I decided to just take it one tooth at a time, then it was fine. Though it definitely helps if you don't have a deadline. Nobody likes practicing or getting things wrong the first time around, but sometimes it's necessary to grow and improve. Hopefully, this step-by-step guide helps you nail your next project the first time around, or at the very least, make the project less daunting and more achievable. I hope you can use my examples and adapt them to your upcoming project. And I hope this is helpful. Please stay tuned for the actual cake making video for this project. Bye!